You know, I was talking to a lovely woman the other day, a friend of mine for decades. We were having a cup of tea, and the conversation, as it often does at our age, turned to our husbands. And she said something to me that really struck a chord. She didn't say it with anger, not really. It was more with a kind of weary sadness. She looked at me and she said, "I just don't think I can stand the sound of him chewing his toast for one more morning." It seems like such a small thing, doesn't it? A trivial annoyance. But I could see in her eyes that it wasn't about the toast. It was about a lifetime of mornings, a lifetime of chewing, a lifetime of just being together in a way that it started to feel heavy instead of light. And it got me thinking. How many of you out there are feeling something similar? Maybe it's not the chewing. Maybe it's the way he tells the same story for the 100th time, or the way he leaves his socks by the chair, or the way he seems to inhabit his own little world while you're bustling around, keeping everything together. It can feel like a slow-burning resentment, and what's so confusing about it is that this is the man you vowed to spend your life with. The father of your children, perhaps. Your partner through so many storms. So why, now, when you have more time together than ever, does it feel so hard? Why does it feel, for some women, like something that's starting to feel a lot like hate? If any of that resonates with you, I want you to know, first and foremost, that you are not a bad person for feeling this way. You are not alone. And what you're feeling is not some personal failing. It's often the result of decades of unspoken expectations, unmet needs, and a fundamental shift in the landscape of your life together. In this series of conversations, I want to gently explore the deep emotional reasons behind this common experience. My hope is that by understanding the why, we can start to find a path toward something different, something softer and more connected. So, let's start at the very beginning. Let's talk about the dreams you had when you were young. Do you remember? That young woman you were, with stars in her eyes, standing at the altar? You dreamed of a partnership. A true meeting of minds and hearts. You'd build a life together, face the world as a team. For many women of our generation, that dream was the cornerstone of everything. But life, as life does, had other plans. Careers happened. Children happened. Mortgages and bills and school runs and caring for your own aging parents. Life became a whirlwind of doing. And in that whirlwind, it's so easy for the being to get lost. The relationship often gets put on a shelf, doesn't it? It becomes something you'll get back to when things calm down. You fall into roles, almost without realizing it. You became the manager of the home, the emotional core of the family, the scheduler, the rememberer of birthdays. And he often became the provider, the fixer of things, the one who retreated into his work. This wasn't a malicious decision. It was just practical. It was how you survived the busy years. But the problem is, those roles can become cages. You stop seeing each other as the lovers and dreamers you once were, and you start seeing each other as the homemaker and the breadwinner. The unique, fascinating individuals you fell in love with get buried under decades of habit and responsibility. And when retirement comes, and the children are gone, you're left standing in a quiet house, looking at this stranger, a stranger who still expects you to be the manager, the cook, the emotional caretaker, but now with no other outlet for your own identity. This leads us to the first deep emotional reason, a profound sense of being unheard and unseen. This is so much more than just not listening. It's about feeling that your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions, and your weariness simply don't register on his emotional radar. It's the cumulative weight of 1,000 small dismissals. Let me give you an example. Imagine you've had a long, frustrating day. Maybe you were at the doctor's, dealing with a confusing bill, or you're just tired from the constant mental load of running a household. He comes in and asks, "What did you do today?" And you start to tell him, you start to explain the small frustrations, and you see his eyes glaze over. He might nod, or offer a quick "that's too bad," before turning on the television or changing the subject to something he finds more engaging. In that moment, what he communicated, even if he didn't mean to, was that your inner world is not important. Your daily struggles are just background noise. And when this happens day after day, year after year, that background noise inside you grows into a roar of resentment. You start to think, does anything I feel even matter to him? Does he see me at all, or just the role I play? And when you feel you don't matter, love cannot grow. It begins to wither, and in its place, something much colder can take root. Now, let's gently move on to another reason that is deeply intertwined with this, and that is the crushing weight of the emotional load. I mentioned the mental load a moment ago. This is something I think every woman understands in her bones. It's the invisible, never-ending to-do list that runs in the back of your mind. It's remembering to buy milk, to call the plumber, to send a card for your granddaughter's birthday, to make sure he's taking his medication, to plan the meals, to notice that the towels are getting thin. It's the constant, low-grade hum of being in charge of the well-being of everyone else. And for so many women, this load is never shared. You might ask for help, and he might even help if you give him a specific task, but the burden of managing it all remains squarely on your shoulders. He is a helper, while you are the CEO of the household. And CEOs don't get to clock out. This becomes especially painful in retirement. He might be relaxing, enjoying his hard-earned leisure, while you are still working just as hard as ever, running the home. You look at him reading the paper or tinkering in the garage, and you think, when is my retirement? When do I get to stop? This isn't about the specific chores, not really. It's about the profound inequality of it. It's about feeling like you are the only one carrying the weight of your shared life. And it's incredibly difficult to feel tender and loving towards someone you perceive as your dependent, rather than your partner. It feels less like a marriage and more like a job you can't quit. So, we have these two powerful forces already at play, the feeling of being invisible and the exhaustion of carrying an unequal load. These don't create hatred overnight. They create a slow drip, drip, drip of disappointment that, over 40 or 50 years, can wear away the strongest of foundations. But there is more to this story, and in our next conversation, we'll continue to gently unpack these emotional reasons, including the powerful role that lost identity and unhealed wounds from the past play in all of this. It's a journey of understanding, and I'm so glad you're here for it. Now, where we left off, we were talking about that feeling of carrying the entire household on your shoulders, that relentless emotional load. And I imagine many of you were nodding along, because it's such a common, shared experience. It's like you're the director, stage manager, and lead actor in the play of your life, while your husband is, well, sometimes it feels like he's just a member of the audience, occasionally offering a comment from his seat. And this leads us to a deeper, and for many women, a more painful layer of this whole situation. It's something that often simmers quietly for years, but can really come to a head in this chapter of our lives. And that is the grief, the quiet mourning, for the person you used to be. Before we were wives, before we were mothers, before we were caregivers to our own parents, we were individuals with our own spark, our own dreams, our own identities. Think back for a moment. Who were you? Maybe you were a talented artist, a keen gardener, a woman with a rising career, a traveler, a reader with a stack of books by her bed. You had your own passions, your own friends, your own way of moving through the world that was uniquely yours. And then, bit by bit, the needs of your family began to eclipse your own. It wasn't a conscious choice to give yourself up, was it? It was a series of small, practical decisions. Your art supplies got packed away to make space for a nursery. Your lunch breaks with friends were replaced by pediatrician appointments. Your quiet reading time was swallowed by helping with homework. For decades, this might have felt normal. It was just what you did. But now, the house is quiet. The children have their own lives. And you look in the mirror and you wonder, where did she go? The woman I used to be? And this is where a very specific kind of resentment can bloom. You might look at your husband and see that he largely got to remain who he was. His career, his hobbies, his sense of self, they may have evolved, but they weren't systematically dismantled by the demands of family life in the same way. He still plays golf with his friends. He still tinkers with his projects in the garage. His identity remained largely intact. So you're not just resentful that he doesn't help with the dishes. You're resentful that his life, his very self, seems to have continued on, while yours was put on hold indefinitely. And the most painful part? He often doesn't even notice this profound loss you've experienced. He doesn't see the ghost of that vibrant young woman standing in his kitchen because he's only ever seen you as his wife, the mother, the homemaker. He doesn't realize you feel like a stranger to yourself. And when you try to explain this emptiness, this loss, he might not understand. He might say something like, "Well, you can do whatever you want now. The kids are gone." But it's not that simple, is it? After 30 or 40 years of putting yourself last, you can forget what it is you even wanted in the first place. The muscle of self has atrophied. This feeling of a lost identity is often tangled up with another powerful emotion, loneliness. And this is a very particular kind of loneliness. It's not about being alone, it's about feeling alone while you are with someone. It's the loneliness of sitting in the same room with a person for years, but feeling a million miles apart. You share a home, a history, a bed, but you no longer share your inner worlds. The conversations, if they happen at all, become purely transactional. What do you want for dinner? Did you pay the electric bill? The grandkids are coming on Saturday. What's missing are the conversations that feed your soul? The what are you thinking about, or how are you really feeling about getting older, or remember that time we... The shared laughter over a private joke, the dreaming about a trip you might take, the simple act of holding hands and talking about nothing and everything. When that emotional intimacy vanishes, the relationship can start to feel like a business partnership, and a strained one at that. You begin to feel like you are the warden of his retirement, and he is your most demanding dependent. And it is incredibly lonely to be in a crowd of two. Now, all of these feelings, the resentment, the grief, the loneliness, they don't exist in a vacuum. They are often poured onto the fertile ground of old, unhealed wounds. Every marriage, over decades, accumulates its share of hurts. The big arguments, yes, but more often it's the small slights that were never properly addressed. The time he forgot your anniversary. The way he sided with his mother in an argument 30 years ago. The career opportunity you gave up for his. The feeling that he wasn't truly there for you during a crisis. For a long time, you might have swallowed these hurts. You told yourself, it's not a big deal, or I don't want to start a fight, or the children need a stable home. You packed those hurts away in a box and stored them in the attic of your heart, thinking you'd deal with them later. But later has arrived. And now, in the quiet and the stillness of this stage of life, that box is full to bursting. Every time he chews his toast too loudly, it's not just about the toast. It's about the anniversary he forgot, the hurtful thing he said, the dream he didn't support. The toast becomes the trigger for a lifetime of pain that was never acknowledged, never apologized for, and never healed. So you see, what looks from the outside like a grumpy, irritable wife who's just hard to please is often a woman who is grieving, who is lonely, and who is carrying the scars of 1,000 unhealed paper cuts on her heart. It's a heavy burden to carry. And understanding this weight is the first, most crucial step toward lightening it. In our final conversation, we'll begin to explore what we can do with this understanding, how we can start to find a path forward, not by changing him, but by reclaiming pieces of ourselves and changing the dynamic from the inside out. So, we've walked through some difficult territory together, haven't we? We've talked about the weight of the emotional load, the grief for the person we used to be, the profound loneliness of being in a partnership that feels empty, and the way old, unhealed wounds can color everything in the present. It's a lot to carry. And if you're seeing your own life reflected in these words, you might be feeling a little heavy-hearted, and that's completely understandable. But here is the most important thing I want you to hear right now. Understanding why this is happening is not the end of the story. It is the very beginning of a new one. Because now, we can stop blaming ourselves. We can stop wondering, what is wrong with me, and start to see this as a relational problem, not a personal failing. And the most empowering part of that realization is this: while you cannot change another person, you have immense power to change the dynamic. You can start to shift the dance, even if your partner doesn't know the new steps yet. It begins not with a confrontation, but with a quiet, gentle turning inward. The first, and perhaps most radical, step is to begin the work of reclaiming you. I know it sounds daunting. After so long, it might feel like trying to find a light switch in a dark, unfamiliar room. But you don't have to start with a grand gesture. It can begin with the smallest of things. What was one thing you loved to do that you let fall away? Was it painting? Gardening? Listening to a certain kind of music? Reading novels? Taking long, meandering walks without a destination? I want you to choose one small, non-negotiable thing and do it just for you, for 15 minutes a day. When you do this, you are sending a powerful message to your own soul: I still matter. My joy matters. And you are also, without saying a word, beginning to change the dynamic in your home. You are demonstrating that your time and your interests have value. He may be puzzled at first. He might even make a comment. But this isn't about him. This is about you rebuilding the foundation of your own identity, brick by brick. And a stronger, more fulfilled you is the cornerstone of any possibility for a better relationship. Now, as you start to fill your own cup, even just a little, the next step becomes possible. And that is to learn a new way of communicating the oldest needs. I know. You've tried to talk to him. You've nagged, you've pleaded, you've maybe even exploded in frustration. And it feels like you're talking to a brick wall. So let's try a different way, one that comes from a place of strength, not desperation. Instead of starting a sentence with you never, or you always, which immediately makes anyone defensive, try framing it from your own experience. It sounds simple, but it's profoundly different. Instead of saying, you never helped me around the house, you could try, I feel overwhelmed and exhausted by the housework, and I would really love to work together as a team to manage it. You are stating your feeling and making a request for partnership. Instead of, you never listen to me, you could say, I have something on my mind that's important to me, and it would mean so much if I could share it with you and feel truly heard. This shifts the conversation from blame to invitation. Will it work the first time? Maybe not. He may be so conditioned to the old patterns that he doesn't know how to respond. But you are changing the script. You are no longer playing the role of the nagging wife, but of a woman clearly and calmly stating her needs. And that, in itself, is an act of reclaiming your power. Finally, and this may be the most challenging piece, it's about consciously choosing to lower the wall of resentment, brick by brick. I am not asking you to forget the past hurts or to pretend they didn't happen. That is neither possible nor healthy. But I am inviting you to consider whether holding on to the resentment is still serving you, or if it is, in fact, poisoning your own well. Forgiveness is not about saying what he did was okay. It is about deciding to free yourself from the corrosive hold that past hurt has on your present happiness. This is a journey you may need to take in your own heart, perhaps even with the help of a trusted friend or a counselor. It involves acknowledging the pain, grieving the disappointment, and then, when you are ready, making a conscious choice to stop letting that old story define your today. It's about looking at him now, in this moment, and trying to see not just the man who hurt you, but the man who is also aging, who is also facing his own fears and losses, and who is likely just as lost in this new stage of life as you are. This doesn't excuse his behavior, but it can help to humanize him, to see him as a flawed fellow traveler rather than as your antagonist. My dear friend, this journey is not about magically transforming a decades-long marriage overnight. It is about you taking back your power, your identity, and your peace. It's about moving from a place of quiet desperation to a place of conscious, purposeful living. Some relationships, with this new understanding and effort, can find a beautiful and deeply connected renaissance. Others may find a more peaceful, respectful coexistence. But in either case, you win. You win back yourself. I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. What resonated with you? What small step do you think you might take for yourself this week? Your stories and wisdom are so valuable, and you may just be the encouragement someone else needs to hear. If this conversation has been helpful, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more talks like this. Remember, it is never, ever too late to turn a new page and to find more joy, more peace, and more of yourself. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You've earned that.